It's Kiss FM. We got to welcome Matthew Bocchi. That is how you pronounce your last name, correct?
Correct.
Okay. If not, I was going to yell at my friend Pooh over here. I was going to be like, dude.
Well, I did my homework. It's Matthew Bocchi.
You're good.
Matthew, we're excited to talk to you because, man, your story, and I don't even know where to start because there's so much and there's so many angles to this because, well, first of all, it hits home with me because you were 9 years old when you had something happen to you that was pretty much a life-changing moment that changed everything, and that was your father was in one of the towers and in the buildings on 9/11. And that was the moment where life completely just everything was different from that moment on, right?
Yeah, that was the turning point in my life, and all of the events that happened after were correlated with the death of my father on 9/11. So, any sort of semblance of a normal childhood pretty much dissipated at the age of 9 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did you find out? What was that morning like for you?
That morning, we were in school. My brother Nick and I were in school. Roughly 2 years apart. And they came into our classrooms and told us, they pulled us out of the classroom, basically. Myself and another student in my classroom, his dad also worked in the World Trade Center. His dad did not pass away in 9/11. Nick and the other student's brother were in the other classroom, 2 years younger than us. We met in the hallway. They told us a plane hit your dad's building. They're evacuating it. They're safe. There's nothing to worry about. And quickly thereafter, they brought us to a classroom where they had us play computer games, which at that time, being 9 years old in fourth grade, that was like a luxury, So they're trying to get our minds off of it. And throughout the rest of the day, kids were getting plucked out of each class. And Nick and I were the only ones who stayed. My mom didn't think it was smart enough smart because, there were so many people at our house by that point, calling my dad's phone, calling hotlines, trying to get an idea of what was going on. So she thought it was best to keep us in school so we didn't have to see that. It makes sense, obviously, now looking back. But we got home that day. My grandmother quickly sent us out of the house to go play with our friends, and that pretty much sums up that day. I mean, I had briefly seen some of the events on television when I got home from school.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the towers. I don't remember if I saw the planes hitting the building, but I saw the towers billowing with smoke. I did see a person jump from the towers, which is why that was so powerful to me. And then seeing the collapse and all that stuff. But it was a quick replay of what had happened, obviously, just hours later. And then I got sent to my friend's house, and that was pretty much what I remember from that day.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm surprised that you don't know what you'd feel like or how you'd feel when you go through a tragedy, and that would be so traumatic that it's almost like sometimes your mind blocks things out. It does just you don't remember anything. So to have details about it is wow. It's almost like you kind of want to and you kind of don't want to.
Well, and at one point, because I know, a lot of people were missing from the towers, but not confirmed, deceased at the time. So at what point did you learn that he had actually passed away?
A week later. And going off of your other point, that's very valid. I have pretty much 4 or 5 distinct memories from that time period. A couple within that followed, and and then his wake and funeral. Those are like my bare memories. Most of it, the rest of it is pretty much blocked out. But a week later, they found him on that Friday, September 14th. They were able to confirm it was him. And then they came a week later and told us that they found him. And that's when, reality started to set in a little bit more. Yeah. But for me, my quest truly began right after, in the earlier years after that followed, because I knew they found him. I knew he died, but I didn't know how he died. And that was what I wanted to figure out, was what specific way did he die?
Is that really where the book started? And well, I don't know if necessarily you knew that, because obviously at 9, you probably think, well, the book's the last thing in your mind. Years go on, you start to investigate, you want to find out, what do you start to unravel? And I know the book will say, it talks about a lot of this. Maybe you can give us a little glimpse into it, but what do you start to find out? I mean, did it give you comfort? Did it give you more distress?
It gave me more distress. It sent me down a deep, dark path of despair. I knew specifics of what they found. Obviously, like I said, I didn't know how he died. So I began looking at these videos and pictures because I had this timeline, this book, Life magazine, hardcover book that had timeline pictures of the day. And in that book, it had a picture of someone jumping from my dad's tower. My dad's company, Cannon Fitzgerald, was on the 100 higher up floors, the top floors, basically, besides windows on the world. So the majority of people that jumped from the towers that day jumped because, well, they had no way out, or, you know, some by accident, but they all came from those upper floors. And so I saw videos of like documentaries and stuff that showed family members from Canner identifying their loved ones. And I started reaching out to, I had these two photographers I reached out to, really, really young. I never heard back. I said, you know, this is my dad's name. He worked on the 105th floor. If there's any way I can meet with you, maybe you can blow up some of these pictures and enhance them for me. Cause I had like photography applications on my computer. I was trying to enhance them the best I could from a Google search. Right. So I didn't have like the raw photos. So it wasn't good enough. I couldn't see really that clear. But I started asking my mother, my one uncle, my Uncle Rob, he's my dad's sister's husband. He worked in the Trade Center that day and got out safely. And I asked him a lot of questions too. You know, I was like, what do you remember seeing about? And I focused on people jumping for some reason. But I started asking my mother, my Uncle Tony, my dad's brother, other family members. And then they were like, your dad didn't jump. We know he didn't jump, but they didn't tell me why they knew that. And then an uncle through marriage started to prey on that vulnerability. And he had been grooming me or trying to groom me for a couple of years, trying to sexually abuse me, and it wasn't working. And when he found out about my, you know, fascination of 9/11 and specifically my dad and this aspect of jumping, he told me, yeah, your dad jumped, which years later I found out not the truth. But that's how this horrible scenario began with him.
I can't even imagine someone taking advantage of someone who's been literally through living hell to groom this person to then be a predator on them is next level sickening. I mean, it
really is. And he was like best friends with my father too. So it's really, really horrible from our family's perspective. That's why they were so stunned and shocked, given just the way he was in terms of nurturing my brothers and I, trying to help us, he was so close by to our house. So everyone was really, really blown away by all that when I came forward. But that's where my unraveling truly began.
And from that, when this happens, because I mean, honestly, you have, to me, everything that you've been through, you have every reason to be the most hateful, negative person in the world, because I can't say I'd be as strong as you. I'd probably be, I don't know what I'd be doing, but you've really taken this and you've turned it into something that, into a good thing, and to turn it into a positive thing. And now, going to speak to people and where does that come from? Because you've struggled with, alcohol and things like that, which I get after you've been through what you've been through. Where did you get the positivity? When did things start to turn around to, and start to see the light and get better?
For years, I tried to melt away all these feelings of guilt, shame, remorse, embarrassment, especially embarrassment. I wanted to feel normal. I wanted to feel like a normal kid. So I used drugs and alcohol to kind of cope with that. And when I finally got sober, after I tried, I never really wanted it, but when I finally truly wanted it and got sober, been sober since, I started speaking at schools. And when I started telling my story, it was the base level stuff. Everyone who knew me pretty much, I could get vulnerable enough and say, yeah, my father died 9/11. This is my story. I use drugs and this is how I cope. But I didn't talk about the sexual abuse to anyone for years. I kept it a secret. I think I told one person in a state of, like drunkenness, and I didn't tell anyone else. And so I finally came forward with that for a variety of reasons, but I came forward about that. And when I started expressing that in my talks and with students and stuff, basically trying to show, look, this happens to people. There's nothing to be ashamed of, especially with men. When it happens to a young man from another man, especially, for me, I'm heterosexual. And so it prompted all these feelings to me, like, oh, like, how could I do this if I'm straight or whatever? So you don't understand the severity of what it does to someone's mind. And I started opening up to that and being really raw, and people were blown away by that. And so when I did that, they started talking to me about their own vulnerabilities, their own struggles, things that they've kept secret. And when I started to see that my resilience could help people, then I was like, I can't hold back. I'm doing a disservice to other people by holding back, essentially. And
Yeah.
so,
Now, did your brother have any of these issues with this person, or?
no, and I'm actually the oldest of 4 boys, and no one else, to my knowledge, had any issues. There was he was reaching out to me again when I was in my sober house. He had reached out to one of my brothers, and when that conversation was brought to my attention, that's when I took action and was like, I have to do something about this.
So did you confront him? Has he been punished in any way?
Yeah, I confronted him initially, right? I said, don't reach out to me, don't reach out to my brothers again, especially my brothers, because I was in New Hampshire and they were living in New Jersey. So I was like, don't reach out to any of them or problems will arise. And he didn't listen to that. So maybe he thought I was bluffing or whatever, but I basically had this weird experience where I ended up coming forward to my old guidance counselor. We grabbed lunch and I told him about it. And that day I was supposed to meet with my Uncle Tony, my dad's brother, for lunch. I was supposed to go back to New Hampshire that night because I had a drug test to take. And I pretty much put off I was supposed to tell my mom, especially my mom, what had happened in this week that I was home, and I completely avoided it. And so I tell my guidance counselor, he's like, you should tell your uncle. And so I tell my Uncle Tony, and we meet at my house that day. We tell my mother together, and she was obviously stunned. Yeah. And they were both stunned, really. And then I started proceeding with legal action, which is something I didn't want to do all those years. I was like worried about, how am I going to win a case? How is anyone going to believe me? Especially when I was using. So I came forward about it. We, proceeded with legal action, and then he was supposed to serve a 7-year sentence. He pled down, and I have no comment on that. There was plenty of evidence, and we had sufficient evidence. I got him on a taped recording and everything saying all these things, and whatever. Can't do anything about that now, but he was serving a 7-year sentence, and he's actually getting out in a week from today. 4 years later. Yeah. Yeah. So I got blindsided with that. I was told initially he was getting out. There was a later date in September after the book was released, and he's getting out now. So I look at my dad as probably he's got another scenario played out for me a little.
Yeah.
He's looking out for me. So.
Yeah, absolutely. But your strength, man, is really truly inspiring, because I think what you are doing it helps so many people. I mean, honestly, because it is such a problem. There is so much stigma, I think, behind being sexually abused, especially when it's a man, it's a male, and people don't want to say it, and it's a vicious cycle. So, I mean, congrats to you for being sober and breaking that cycle and making it. And because I know every day has got to be. Just because you're in a good place now doesn't mean that sometimes you don't have your struggles. And I think that's important as people deal with it. And right now, especially during the times that we're in, mental health is such a major thing. What would you tell somebody who's struggling? Because you've been through a lot of tragedy in your life. What would you tell that person? Because everybody's tragedy is when they're going through it, it doesn't seem like, oh my God, Matthew, you've been through the worst of the worst. But when someone's in that dark spot, what would you tell that person?
I've been asked this question a couple of times, and it makes me look back, because there was, and you'll read it in the book, but there was some, I was in a moment of dark, really dark abyss that I didn't think I was ever going to get out of. I was contemplating, death, and I wanted to die. And I held on to the teeniest little bit of hope that I could hold on to, this little bit of light left that I had inside of me. And I eventually chased that. And now I'm doing so much better. I've come to terms with my father's death. I know the truth of what happened to him. I don't, go through this engorgement of looking at these videos and these pictures and try to empathize with him, and came forward about the abuse. He's not going to serve a life sentence, but I did what I had to do, and I'm sober today. So I'm trying to come forward and show people that, look, even if things seem so that there's no way that you can get out of this despair, you can. And just with sheer resilience and perseverance, you can get through it. And you're right. I mean, mental health is issues right now with COVID and everything, people not being able to interact. It's really, really prominent. And if I didn't have meetings that I go to, 12-step meetings I go to, I don't know how I would be dealing with, my sobriety and stuff like that throughout this pandemic.
Well, thankfully,
this memoir is amazing. I mean, they're saying that it's the first memoir told by a child of 9/11 and your journey through all this since it happened. So Sway out now, came out this week. So congratulations on that. And it's brave of you to be able to open up and share your story with, the world, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Yeah. It's, my story is definitely unique from a lot of children of 9/11 too. I try to mention that a lot because I know I have really, really good friends who also lost their dads, and they didn't do the same types of things that I did in terms of looking at that stuff. They just they knew their dads passed away and they wanted to just grieve in their own way and move on from it. And I was stuck. And so my story is definitely unique, but it is my story.
Yeah, it is. No, and I think, it all happens for a reason. And I know that's cliche, but what do you think you'd be doing? I always think about these what ifs. What do you think you'd be doing if this didn't happen? If September 11th and it did, and what do you think your path in life? Do you think you'd be a writer? Do you think like, who knows?
I always wonder what, in terms of drugs and alcohol, in terms of, I have a very addictive personality. I get addicted. I mean, look, my fascination with 9/11, my father's death, was its own addiction. Yeah. Right. So I look at, that was before I ever touched a drink or a drug. So I look at my personality and my tendencies, and I think it may have crept up in other ways. I think that I am an alcoholic. I definitely am at heart. I think that if my father didn't die in 9/11, it may have been suppressed for a little bit longer, but I don't know if I would have been a writer. I mean, I started writing when I was 10 years old. My Uncle Sal, my mom's brother, gave me a journal for Christmas, and he wrote a note in it, and he said, just write in this as much as you want, and just get, feel free to write whatever you want, and just get your emotions out there. And I look back actually, and there were some things I wrote about my dad at, I was like 10 years old, and seeing the transformation. A lot of the topics that I discussed were expressed in a different way through the book, but those same feelings were there, just more mature. Yeah. And so I pursued like finance, in an attempt to kind of follow my father's footsteps, and I was miserable. And I did that in and out of sobriety too. Before I got sober, I was working in finance. After, and life had a way of telling me that this is what I need to be doing.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I would be in terms of writing, but I think that my passion has always been trying to help people. People have been telling me to do this for years. Yeah. Maybe not necessarily writing, but social work or something. And I always pushed back against it. I didn't want to do it. And I was like, oh, no. And now I have, the most fulfillment I've felt in years.
Yeah. Good. That's awesome. What do you, when the day comes, like when September 11th, is there certain things you do? I know it's probably a difficult day, and I'm sorry for that. Are you angry? Do you look back? Do you reflect? Do you think about, because I don't know. I had a friend who's unfortunately, he had an uncle that was in the towers as well. And his reaction was he wanted to suit up and go fight in the war. I
even wanted to do that after that.
Oh, I know. Me too.
I'm dead serious.
No, I know.
Frustrating.
So did I. And I was like, yeah, I'm not built for this, but I wanted to do something. On this day, what do you do on September 11th? What do you do?
Well, my feelings on that day have definitely changed. I have to say that too. I was the same when I was like 11, 12 years old, like growing up, my friends and I, like we had airsoft guns, and we would like print out pictures of like Osama bin Laden and like shoot at it and stuff. I dealt with my emotions in a different way, but I had anger a lot as a kid, but in the other years, before I got sober, especially, I would open up my laptop every day and just look at this stuff. Now we go to this memorial called the Joseph Shrine. It's in Sterling, New Jersey. It has two beams from the Trade Center, and in the middle there's a bell, and the bell goes off when the first plane hits, second plane hits, and the mass is usually over by the time the collapse. But It's when the bell goes off automatically, there's a moment of silence. And we've been going there for the entire time. We never went to ground zero for the memorial there. And now it's very touristy, so I try to avoid it. But now my outlook and my emotions are totally different. Yes, it's a sad day, but I try to enjoy my dad's life. It's a reminder of my dad's life. He was 38 years old. He accomplished so much. He came from nothing and accomplished so much in a short period of time. And he enjoyed life. He enjoyed the little things in life, family, friends, a nice day outside, barbecue. He enjoyed loving his family and friends, essentially. And so I try to do that. I try to remember him for who he was, not how he died.
Have you been to the 9/11 museum in New York?
Yeah, we went, my family and I went about 4 years ago. We went into the memorial, the museum part. They have some sections that are blocked off, that are a little bit more graphic. We went in there and checked it out. It was definitely, it was tough.
Yeah.
And it's tough, and I apologize for that. It's tough because you're walking in there. They let you in there when you're a family member. They let you in there for free. But you're walking in there with like tourists, essentially. You're walking in there with people who don't understand. They didn't come from New York. They're not from New York, and they don't understand how this day was so powerful.
It's so much more. Yeah, it's so much more. I lived in New York for a while, and I used to walk by every day. I worked at Z100, and I would walk down to, right past. And this is when I worked there. It was fenced off, and, they were doing things. And there wasn't a day that I walked by where, I used to go to this place called Tribeca Tavern, and I would get the worst feeling and knot in my stomach. And I'm not even affected by it on such a personal level as you. And it's still would make me feel nauseous almost every day. I would avoid it. There was times I would go around because I didn't want to see it because it was so just emotional, and something about that area, not so much now when I go back or when I look at it, but then when it was just so fresh and it just seemed so, oh man, it was haunting. It was haunting to experience. So,
that's a perfect word for it, because, when we were down there, where the memorial is, that's where the old PAD station was. Yeah. So for me, it's eerie. It's very eerie because my dad took the path, I just imagine, that they came up that day, and it's like, you just go, they were going to work just like on a normal day, not a care in the world. It was beautiful
out.
Yep.
Beautiful morning. Well, congrats on everything. I think your story's inspiring. Read the book, Sway. And I can't wait to read it just because, listen, anyone who's overcome so many obstacles in their life should be proud. And it is the reason why you're here. At the end of the day, I feel like this is exactly why you're here. You're doing exactly, and your dad would be so proud of you. So, I mean, good for you, man. Congratulations.
And my mom read an early copy and said to me, I don't know how you're still alive. Your dad was definitely looking over you. And there's some stuff I left out too. So
good. We'll get to read it, but absolutely. I mean, your story seems like one of the most powerful stories I've seen and heard about in a while. I think we all were like blown away when we heard, what you've been through. We were like, how? I mean, we complain about things in the morning, getting up earlier, complain about everything. Yeah. For you to experience this is wow. I mean, good for you, man.
Thank you.
I had a crazy story one time. I was at with a buddy backstage at a concert, and they know this story, everyone on the show, but I was talking to this guy, and he was real kind of quiet and chill, but I didn't think much about it. And he had this shirt on that said like basically he's Butte versus everyone, and I had everyone versus Detroit. And I was like, what's that all about? And he's like, oh, I'm from Montana. Long story short, we take pictures, hang out all day. And later on in that, like a week later, my friend says, I can't believe you met this guy. And I was like, I just met him. I don't know what about him. Turns out he was the guy who shot Osama bin Laden. It was Rob O'Neill. And we had talked a couple times since then. But it was chilling to hear, to think, but he was one of those guys that would go talk to people and family members. And that's why he said eventually he started talking about it, because he was breaking this code of being a Navy SEAL. But he said, I didn't care because it was giving people so much closure when I got to speak to them about it and talk to people about it, you know?
Yeah.
I can't imagine what he went through, but he said, I don't care when you see the people and the victims and what they've been through. I don't care what's cool and what's not cool. I'm helping. So
I remember where I was when I heard that news. I was in college, and
really,
I went to Villanova University, and there was right where I was living freshman year. There was there's a church right across the way from where the freshman dorms are. And my friends, we were drinking and stuff. My friends were all like, "Oh my God, this is amazing! You must be so happy." And I actually removed myself, and I walked to the church, and I just sat in there and just said a prayer. And it was such a peaceful. There was a lot of closure. There was closure, but at the same time, I mean, I feel like there's so many more people who should have been punished too.
Yeah.
So it's but he's the main one. But it's if you could get all of them, would you really feel the closure at the end of the day? Would it change anything?
Yeah, it seemed like you'd be chasing forever. If it's not one thing, it's this. But you're getting the closure by living every day in a positive mindset, being sober and helping. So that's the closure, really.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, thank you, man. I can't wait to read the book. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Go check out Sway. It's out right now. And, anytime you need anything, let us know.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Matthew.
All right.
See you, man.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.